For the basics, where were you born?
Where was I born? I was born right here. I am from Beardstown. I've lived here my entire life except when I have been away with the military. So I am 61 years old, so I was born here in 1955.
Okay.
Okay.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Okay, my father was Henry DeLoche, and he did a lot of different things. He was a school custodian, and then he was a school bus driver, and he also worked until he retired for Oscar Mayer. My mother had various different jobs. She did housekeeping. She worked in retail stores as a cashier and a clerk, and when her health, until her health did not allow that, and then she was just pretty much a stay-at-home mom.
Okay. Excuse me. Have you got any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother. My brother Adrian is older than me by about 22 months. So he would be 63 this year. Yeah. No sisters. No sisters.
Did they serve in the military?
My father served in the military. He was in the Army. My brother was in the military. He served in the Army and then later was part of the Army National Guard. And then after the Army National Guard, he enlisted and served in the U.S. Coast Guard. So he wore two different hats. My military service began in 1973 when I enlisted in the Air Force, and I served in the Air Force for 4 years, 7 months, and 27 days, but I wasn't counting how many, but that's just the number of years, months, and days they printed on my paperwork when I got out, so I just for some reason remembered that. And after I was out of the service for 11 months, I decided that I needed to go back. So I enlisted in the Army National Guard, and I served in the Army National Guard from 1979 until 1994. So altogether I was in the military for 21 years.
So, which branch of the military do you serve?
Well, both of them. You know, I mean, I was active duty with the Air Force, and I was an Army National Guardsman. So, you know, I notice it's all Army. After I enlisted in the Army, it's kind of like they say in Texas Hold'em, I was all in for the Army, which is really kind of a strange thing because the Air Force is a different kind of military service. It's almost all done on an air base, on an military installation, and they treat you very professionally, and that's not to say that the Army doesn't, but it's two very different cultures. The Army operates in a field environment. Where the Army goes, there's not necessarily, we go where there aren't roads, we go where there's no camps, we go wherever the fight takes us. The Air Force tends to operate from whatever place they can establish an airfield or an airbase. So you have a specific job in the Air Force, and let's say if you're an aircraft engine mechanic, then you know that your job is to go work on aircraft engines. That's your job. You show up every day just like a civilian job, and they tell you go do your job, and that's that. In the Army side of things, the structure is much different, and there is more of a directed chain of command. In the morning, you show up for your first formation, your first gathering, and then you are told what your orders are for the day. And when you're living on an air base, you have, these days they're like what they don't call them barracks anymore, they call them dormitories. And you may have one roommate, and it's set up more like an apartment. You have a living room, you have your bedroom, you have Some of them have kitchenettes in them. Most of them don't, however, but two rooms may share one common bathroom, much like in a home where, you know, the kids have the bathroom that they share between rooms, and then the parents have a master bedroom. Well, you might have that kind of a situation, and then you have a big dining hall where everybody goes to eat. So it's a much different environment. In the Army, they have dining halls too, and they also have dormitories, but you don't spend a lot of time there because you go to the field and then you eat what they call MREs, okay? Meals ready to eat. And they come in a plastic bag, and you tear the top off and you look inside and you hope you get something you like, because they have different types of meals, and some of them are better than others. So, and a lot of times the soldiers will trade things. It's like, okay, you've got ham and beans and I've got corn and rice or something, and they'll say, well, I'll trade you this for that, or something like that. So a lot of trading goes on at mealtime, kind of like when kids show up with sack lunches at school and there's something in there they don't like, well, they'll trade. So soldiers are not that much different.
Were they good to make warm, or?
Sometimes now they have what they call heat tablets, and so they will have a tablet that you can actually light, and it will generate heat. And I think they even now have a package that they can break and put the food inside of it and shake it all up and it warms up. I don't know. You know, I came from the Stone Age, kind of. We had what they called sea rations, and those meals were actually in little tin containers. And you had to have a special little can opener. You usually wore it on your dog tags around your neck, and you'd open up your can. And but the nice thing about those is you could take your can of food and open it up a little bit, and if you were close to a vehicle that had an engine, a gasoline or diesel engine, you could take your can of food and set it on the engine, which would be hot, and it would warm up your food for you. So otherwise they had little ways all kinds of different ways that you could heat them up. And the other nice thing about those old sea rations is soldiers are always finding new ways to use things that weren't originally the intended purpose. So sometimes they would take those cans of sea rations and they would string them on wire and put them around the perimeter, and then fill them with rocks and use them like tripwires. So if anybody came sneaking around where you were camped, they would catch their foot on that wire, the wire would shake, then the can would shake, and the rocks inside would shake, and you'd know somebody was there that wasn't maybe supposed to be. So there were a lot of different little things that you could do with them. But now things, but they didn't fit in pockets very well, and now all of the meals are designed to basically fit in your pocket of your trousers, or you can stuff them inside your shirt. A lot of different changes have taken place in the more than 40 years since I originally enlisted in the military. Next question.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
High school. I actually enlisted in the Air Force before I graduated from high school. I graduated from high school in June of 1973, which was probably before many of your parents were born. And I graduated from high school but I enlisted in the Air Force on February 5th of 1973, so about 3 months, almost 4 months before I graduated from high school. And then I graduated from high school maybe June 6th. On June 24th, I was in basic training. So I went straight from high school, had 3 weeks off, and I was in the Air Force full time. So I didn't have a lot of time to get in trouble and do a lot of the silly things that kids do after they get out of high school. I just simply did not have time for that.
Really? Mm. So you said you first went to the Air Force,
Yes.
and why did you choose that one first?
The Air Force, well, it's kind of hard to explain, but when I graduated from high school, I was a really little bitty guy. I'm serious, I was very small. I weighed 115 pounds, okay? Some of the girls maybe in this room weigh that much or maybe more. I was very, very small. I was 5'8", but I was like this big around. And so I didn't think that the Army would necessarily be a good fit for me, because what the Army requires you to do in the field requires a lot of heavy lifting. I was just not built for that. I was too small to play sports when I was in high school, because all we had was, back then, was football, basketball, baseball, and track. There was no soccer. There was no wrestling. If they'd had wrestling, I could have done that, because I would have had my own weight class pretty much. But I was so small, I thought, I better go someplace where I can do a job that I can handle. So I chose the Air Force. Plus, the Air Force appealed to me from the standpoint, again, of the professional manner in which they conduct their business. So when I enlisted, I became a law enforcement specialist, in other words, an Air Force security policeman. And oddly enough, then after some time after I got out, that's how I spent my civilian career. I spent 20 years as a police officer here in Beardstown.
What happened when you departed from training camp and during your early days of training?
Basic training, that was kind of a shock, because all of a sudden you have people telling you what to do at every hour of the day. And after I got out of that, then it was straight into another form of training for security police work. I went from basic training straight into military police training, and that was another 6 weeks worth of work and schooling. So, and then after that, I was assigned to an air base over by Champaign, Illinois, about 125 miles from here. It was called Chanute Air Force Base, and it's no longer open. They closed it many, many years ago. But I was stationed there for about 3 years. And then they sent me to Korea, and I was in Korea for a year. And then I came home and was stationed down by St. Louis at Scott Air Force Base near Belleville, Illinois, for about a year and a half. So out of almost 5 years in the Air Force, I spent nearly 4 of them in Illinois.
And what are some instructions that they gave you?
What were some of the instructions? A lot of times you receive all kinds of different orders, depending on the job that you have. But a lot of times you're just given general orders, and those, I wish I could remember them, that among the first things you're taught are your general orders are: you will report to your post as ordered, you will stand your watch, and you will not quit your post until you are properly relieved. You had 3 basic general orders that you followed every day. And that's common basically across all the branches of the military. You have to learn that you are part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of a team. And the military is just that. It's a team. It's a really, really big team, but it's still a team. And each member of that team has to do his or her job and do it well, otherwise the team doesn't function. Now, this is something I want to address to the young ladies here. This is something that I think is very important, because when you go into, if you were considering the possibility of becoming part of the military, you hear a lot about equal pay for equal work. In a lot of places in society, a woman's work is not valued as much as a man's. In the military, you get paid exactly the same. If you go in and you're a private first class in the Army, and you're 5'2" and a little girl that weighs 100 pounds, and there's a guy over there that's 6'5" and weighs 260 pounds, he gets paid the same you do. Okay? You all get the same pay, you get the same benefits, everything is the same, but it's based on your pay grade. In other words, the rank that you earn. If you are a woman and you are an officer, say a captain, then every captain in the Army gets paid the same as any other captain in the Army, unless their job has a hazardous duty, like if you're a pilot, okay, pilots draw flight pay, but again, a girl flying a plane gets paid the same as a man flying a plane. In the military, men and women are on an equal playing field where pay is concerned. Not in all things, but where pay is concerned, it's all the same. And I think that's very important for people to recognize, because it's not that way in much of the world. What else you got?
Did you receive any specialized training? If so, what?
I received some specialized training as a military police officer, and the police officer training that I received was very good. It's excellent. In fact, after I left the military, I became a police officer here, and the training that I received as a military police officer was actually better than what the state of Illinois expected me to learn to be a police officer in Beardstown. So the training that you get in the military is excellent. And again, talking about military jobs, let me ask a question to any of you. What would be your dream job if you could have any job? What would it be? Orthodontist. Well, you can go to dental school and become an orthodontist, and then you can enlist in any branch of the military and go get paid to be doing dental work on military people and their families, because military people have children. And their children need braces. So you could be an orthodontist, and you could be, as an orthodontist, you would be a commissioned officer in whatever branch of the service that you choose. You would be very well paid. You would receive pay and allowances for housing. You would receive benefits. You would receive free health care. You would be guaranteed at least 30 days off, 30 vacation days every year. So lots of benefits. Who's got another job? Let's say, who would like to be a carpenter? Anybody like to be a carpenter? Any guys? How about a television reporter? Be on TV.
Something close.
I have no idea.
Or a radio personality. Be the person on the radio that plays music. Did you know you can do that in the military? The military has its own radio and television stations. It's called American Forces Radio and Television Service. And you get stationed overseas, and you go on television and you read the news, and you report the news just like you would if you were working for NBC or CNN or Telemundo, any place like that. Whatever job, if you wanted to be an electrician, if you wanted to be a computer programmer, if you wanted to be a plumber, the military has need for all of these things, and they will provide you the very best training that's available to do these jobs. They won't pay you as much as the civilian market may, but guess what? After your time is up in the military, now you've got all this excellent training, and now you can go out into the civilian market and make even more money. But they won't guarantee you 30 days off every year. So as far as specialized training goes, you can get whatever kind of training that you want in the military. If you want to become a dental assistant, if you want to become a nurse's aide, if you want to be a nurse, those are all jobs that you can do in the military because the military has those needs.
Okay. And how hard was it to adapt to the military life, to the physical activities and food and routines?
The military adapting is very hard because everybody goes through basic training, and in basic training they do what they call tear you down. In other words, they strip away everything that you have that may be what sets you apart. Guys, the first thing they're going to do when you go to the military is they're going to cut off all of your hair. They're going to cut off all of your hair. If you have a mustache or a beard, they're going to tell you, shave it off. Because they don't want you being any different than anybody else in appearance. And that's part of, again, breaking you down to the point where you understand it is not me as an individual. It's part of teaching you how to operate as part of a unit, as part of a team. So every moment of your day is structured. They tell you exactly when to get up. They tell you exactly when to go to bed. They tell you when you can sleep and when you can't sleep. They tell you when you can eat. They tell you when you can't eat. Every minute of your day while you're in basic training is structured time. And sometimes it's very stressful. It becomes very stressful. And so once you learn, truthfully, the big secret to understand is when you're going through this training is your drill sergeants may scream at you and they may yell at you, but they can't hit you and they can't kick you and they can't kill you and they can't eat you. So basically that doesn't leave much for them to do except scream at you. And once you get used to that, it's kind of like when your mom and dad are mad, okay? It gets, they get over it. You get used to it after a while. So, but once you get past the stress and you get into the routine, you adapt. And then you end up coming out of it stronger to be able to deal with things.
Where did you serve?
Where did I serve? I have been in lots and lots of places. In the Air Force, I told you earlier that I spent 4 years in Illinois, 2 at Chanute Air Force Base over by Champaign, and 2 down at Scott Air Force Base just east of St. Louis. And then I was in Daegu, Korea for a year. I really liked it in Korea. Korean people are wonderful people, and they treat American service people very well there. And then when I came back to the Illinois National Guard, I became a public affairs officer. I have a background in journalism, photojournalism more specifically. In other words, I take pictures and I write stories. And I became pretty good at that. And when the military found out, when the Army National Guard found out that I had that skill set, they said, we would like you to do that for us. So the last 7 years that I was in the Army National Guard, they sent me to 7 different countries. I have spent time in Germany, multiple trips to Germany, which is just beautiful, Holland, Belgium. I've also spent time in Honduras. I've spent time in Bolivia. I have spent time in Panama. And I was also sent to serve in Saudi Arabia. And the worst one, it was just horrible. I really hated to go there, but they made me go. I had to go to the Bahamas for a while. It was,
You hate the place.
it was brutal. It was just terrible there. All that nice weather and those nice beaches and the hotels, and it was just awful.
I believe
It was a really rough job, and somebody had to do it, so I did it. Yeah.
it's good.
So my job sent me all over the world, and my job was to take pictures of Illinois Army National Guard soldiers doing their missions overseas and then come home and write stories about them. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Why would you say the Bahamas are awful?
I was being, I was joking.
Oh.
Yeah, it was so terrible there. It was, it's like, it's kind of like having to go to Six Flags. You never want to go there, but somebody has to.
Also, I have another question.
Yes.
Were you in World War II?
No, I wasn't quite old enough for that,
Okay.
because that happened before I was born.
Well, oh yeah, have you heard of L pills? And do they still use them today?
L pills. I'm not exactly sure.
Well, I know what they are.
Can you explain that
Yeah,
for
they're
me,
filled
please?
with a toxin, and they're mostly used for spies when they go behind enemy grounds.
Oh,
And
it's
if
possible.
they get caught, they take a bite out of it.
Lethal
and
pills. They
Yeah,
die.
and they die without any torture, so it's painless.
No, they
and
don't. They don't.
have to go through.
They don't
interrogation.
issue those to people as a rule. That's only for people who
I don't like
have
spies and stuff.
who
Do they
have
still
very
use those?
specific knowledge. I can't tell you that. It would not surprise me to know that they exist, but no, I was never given anything like that. Okay, what else we got?
If you serve abroad, what are your memories of that experience?
Being overseas, especially when I went to Korea, was a very shocking experience because in the United States and in Europe and in North America, you can, if you speak Spanish and you speak English, there are certain things common to both languages that you can kind of figure out. You can look at the way a word is spelled and kind of develop a meaning for that. But when you go to Asia, you look at writing that doesn't make any sense to you at all because they don't use the alphanumeric letters and numbers that we do. Nothing makes sense. Nothing in their language sounds remotely similar to anything that we speak. Their money is different, so you don't know what the difference is You may not know what the difference is between won, which is the Korean form of money, or yen, which is the Japanese form of money. It doesn't make sense to you. So a lot of times you just go and you don't even know how to ask how much does this cost, because you don't speak or understand the language. So a lot of time, a lot of things get passed back and forth in writing. In most other cultures, except here in the United States, in Korea, English is taught in the elementary schools. In Europe, English is taught in the elementary schools. English is the dominant language of business around the world. So all of the other countries' children know some form of English. So what my memory is that stands out most is I got over there and I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't speak their language, I couldn't count their coins. But what I did learn was their people were wonderful. And I have, in all of my travels, I have learned that it's not where you're from that really matters. It's who you are as a person. It's how we treat each other that matters. It's how I treat you, how I treat you, and how you treat me. And the sooner we all begin to understand that that's what really matters, then the better off we're all going to be. The other thing that I learned is that in the United States, even our poor people are much richer than people who are the poor people in other countries. In Honduras, I learned to understand what real poverty was. I saw homes that were simply made out of mud caked up between sticks, where the roofs were made out of grass and tree limbs and sticks, and there were no windows and there were no doors. I mean, there were openings for doors. Obviously, if it didn't have a door, you can't get in and you can't get out, but there was not a door that closed. And I asked a doctor who was working there, I said, how do these people take care of their things? They don't have any doors, they don't have any windows. And he looked at me and told me, if you don't have anything, you don't have to worry about protecting it. No. And these are people that literally every day had to walk for miles, many miles, just to get a bucket of water. Imagine if your house was right here and you had to go to the river all the way downtown to get a bucket of water to bring home so you could have water to cook with, so that you could have water to bathe with, so that you could have water to drink. That is a really, really difficult world they live in. I also learned that in Honduras and in some places, other countries in Central America where people are exceptionally poor, you see a lot of children who appear to be blonde-haired. And again, I asked this doctor, why do I see all of these light-haired children here? Because I thought maybe it was because when the Spanish came from Spain, Those are light-skinned, light-haired, sometimes blue and green-eyed people. They're Western Europeans. And I said, is this genetic, a trait that's been left behind by the Spaniards? He said, no. When you see these children with the light hair, it's malnutrition. They don't have enough good food to eat, enough protein in their diet for their hair to assume its natural color. That tells you what poverty is really about. So I've learned that those of us who live in a place like the United States, even though we may not have as much money as someone else, even though we may be classified, we may feel like we're poor, we're not. We go to the faucet, we want a drink of the water, we go to the faucet and we turn the tap and the water flows. We don't have to pick up a bucket and go for miles. If we need a dentist, if we need a doctor, there's one in town. In places in Central and South America, they don't have them. People walk literally for days when they find out a doctor is coming to a village. They will walk for days to get there. So we are a very fortunate people to not only live where we are, but to be born here and have what we share here.
Yeah.
If you were on the front lines, what combat action did you witness?
I was not a wartime soldier. In the 21 years in the military that I spent, I did not have to go to war. And I'm very grateful for that. But at the same time, it makes me wonder whether or not I was the kind of soldier that I wanted to be or thought I might be. It made me wonder, was I good enough? Was I strong enough physically and mentally to be able to handle those hard decisions that come in a war? And we all watch movies about war. But until you're put into a situation and you understand how horrible war can be, when you're trained to use a weapon system that its sole function is to destroy people and buildings and possibly the people inside those buildings, it really opens up your eyes to how terrible a thing war is. In a war, the biggest rule in war is, number one, young men die. It's not old men like me that go fight wars. It's old men in politics that start wars, and then young people have to go fight those wars, and those young people die. That's the first rule of war. The second rule of war is innocent people die. Innocent people like children, like you. You've all seen the pictures that have been coming out of Syria and Iraq of the little children who get hurt. That's the second rule of war. Innocent people die. Young children, old people, mothers and fathers who have no interest in the war, no part in the war, but are still extremely affected by the war. The third rule of war is this: no general how great. No politician, how strong, or president, how powerful, can change either rule number 1 or rule number 2. War is a horrible thing. And those people who train to fight wars know that if we are called to do that, it's what we will do, because it's what our country asks of us. And sometimes it's just absolutely necessary. But we don't want to do it without a very, very good cause. I was at one time in command of what was known as a weapons platoon. I had under my command 3 weapons called 81 millimeter mortars. And an 81 millimeter mortar is like a small cannon, but it works differently. In a cannon, you would load the round from the back. You load the shell from the back and you pull the cord and it shoots out the front. With a mortar, you drop the shell down the tube, it goes down to the bottom, it hits a firing pin, and then comes out the front. And it's used, it's short-range artillery and can be used in very small spaces. But when that shell comes down, it comes down almost straight down like this, and it explodes in a circle. And that circle is 35 meters in diameter. Okay? 35 meters, that's roughly 105 feet. That's about the length of this building. Okay? So if a mortar shell were to land, let's say, in a field the size of this building, anybody standing up in that field would have less than 50-50 chances of surviving. If it lands in the field and you're standing up, you're probably going to die. And I had 3 of those guns that I commanded. So that meant there would be 3 shells coming down, each exploding 35 meters wide. So now we're talking 105 meters, more than a football field. So if there was anyone standing in that football field when those shells came down, they were going to die. And my biggest fear was having to fire those shells at or near a village, knowing that there may not, or that there may be innocent people there. That was a source of fear for me, that a command that I would give as a lieutenant or as a captain would cause innocent people to die. But again, that's what happens in war. And that's why wars are something that need to be avoided.
These are the last 2 questions. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview? And is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview? If so, what?
Wow, that's a big question. I think it's important that everybody should consider service to their community and to their country at some point in their lives. This nation that we are part of does not exist without people to protect it. Our community does not exist without police officers, firefighters, paramedics to protect us. So my hope would be that some of you would consider taking these very, very difficult jobs. Being part of the military, being a public servant in one of these difficult jobs. Not all people who are part of the military are combat people. In fact, only 1 out of maybe 20 to 40 people will ever, in the military, is involved with actual combat duties. Because for every soldier that's in the field out there doing the fighting, you have to have someone who is behind him cooking meals, who is providing supplies, bullets, and as we used to call it, beans, Band-Aids, and bullets. Somebody's got to get the supplies there. Somebody has to drive the trucks to get the fuel there. Somebody has to do all of this planning to get the machinery of war, of the military, to work. So it takes a lot of people in a military environment. And just because you're in the military does not mean that you're going to be part of the fighting. By the same token, you may not be trained as an infantry soldier to go out there to fight, but the way wars are fought these days, the fight may come to you. So anytime a military person steps up to the line to enlist and signs their name on that document and hands over their life to the military, they're essentially writing a check, a blank check, to the people of the United States, to the people of this community and all communities in this country. They're issuing a check that is redeemable with their blood, and if necessary, their life. That's the contract that soldiers sign with their countries. And that is what makes soldiers, whether they're in the Navy, the Army, the Coast Guard, the Air Force, or the Marines, that's what makes soldiers a little different from everybody else. The same with police officers. When they get up in the morning, they go to work, and they issue that check every day because it may be their last day. We don't know. But I would encourage all of you to find some way to serve your community, to serve your country. There's things like AmeriCorps. There's things like the Peace Corps, where you go to other countries and help some of those impoverished people that are carrying water miles and miles and miles, and teach them how to drill wells or help them drill a well in their community. There are a lot of opportunities for you to do good things and great things. And we need to think of that, because we are not on this planet alone. We are not in our communities alone. We're part of something much bigger. And we all need to help each other, regardless of our skin color, regardless of our place of birth, regardless of what language we speak, regardless of what religion we practice. Because when it all comes down to it, again, and I said this earlier, it's about how I treat you. It's about how I treat you. It's about how all of you treat me and how we treat each other. And that's what you need, what I would hope that you would remember. But I would also hope that, you know, if you're looking for a career, there are a lot of good things that the military does. And I will point this out too. It's the military does not just fight wars. It does not just fight wars. When there is a disaster in Haiti, when there is a typhoon in Thailand, among the first people there are members of the United States military, flying in food, flying in water, flying in supplies to help people. So there are a lot of ways that we can do other great things for people and for each other.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much.
I'm honored to be here.